I felt sorry for Joe Biden because I didn't think she was protecting him. She wasn't protecting him from himself.
Welcome back to the Tara Palmeri Show. Sally Quinn is the ultimate DC insider and defender of the Washington establishment. Her husband, the late Ben Bradlee, was the legendary executive editor of the Washington Post during Watergate. You'll remember him from the movie All the President's Men. Well, Sally is known in Washington for hosting her infamous salons, these dinners where people at the highest levels of power speak frankly about what's happening in Washington. So she's very plugged in. That's why I was shocked to hear Sally's unfiltered take on President Joe Biden's diagnosis of an aggressive form of prostate cancer. She thinks it's impossible that they didn't know. And she blames the former First Lady, Jill Biden, for not talking him down for running for re-election.
I blame Jill Biden. I thought it was just elder abuse, really, what they were putting in.
Sally speaks with candor on what the Washington ruling class was thinking during Biden's presidency and why they didn't push harder to get him out of the race sooner. I initially invited Sally on the show to talk about her latest piece in the New York Times. It was titled, Watergate-era Washington was less toxic than this. It's just all about how President Trump has instilled a level of fear and paranoia in the town of Washington. And we get into that in this episode. One of my favorite bits, though, is how they've managed to self-soothe their anxiety through improv parties at Sally's house featuring Bob Woodward. Definitely stick around to hear about that. Sally, thank you for joining the show. It's a pleasure to have you. You are a legend in Washington after many decades of really being kind of a defender of the establishment and chronicling how each administration leaves its imprint on it.
I don't feel like a legend. But I have been through a lot. I've lived here. I'm an Army brat, so I moved around most of my life, and I came to Washington my senior year in high school and have lived here on and off ever since. So that was a long time ago. And I've seen a lot, been through Watergate, been through Trump once, going through Trump again now.
Right. Yeah, we'll get into that. Your latest piece in the New York Times about how this is scarier than the Watergate era that you were working in at the Washington Post. And obviously at the time you were with Ben Bradlee, the legendary executive editor of the Washington Post, who was leading that investigation. So I definitely want to get into that with you. But first, I think we have to talk about the news of the week, the day, probably the month. Devastating news that the former president, Joe Biden, has an aggressive form of prostate cancer. I know you have spoken very openly about dementia and how it impacted your late husband. But what were your first thoughts when you heard that he had this level of prostate cancer that had metastasized all the way to the bone?
I was shocked because I don't see how it got this far. I mean, the president of the United States has the best medical care of anybody in the world, or should. And it should have been diagnosed a long time ago. And so it's hard for me not to believe that they didn't know about it. And we're waiting to reveal it until it got too aggressive. That's my little conspiracy theory, but I don't understand how it got this far. I mean, prostate cancer is curable. And I have so many men friends who've had prostate cancer and have survived and thrived with having had the PSA test when they should have, right. Which you'd normally have an annual physical.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Rahm Emanuel's brother, Zeke Emanuel, who was a part of Biden's COVID task force, he said on Morning Joe yesterday that he found it really hard to believe that it wasn't detected either because of the test that you mentioned, unless President Biden chose not to take that test, which is recommended to all men between the ages of 55 and 70. And clearly he was older than that period. I mean, do you think that's possible that he would have said, I don't want to know?
I can't imagine it. They say often, well, if you have prostate cancer, if you're a certain age, you're not going to die of prostate cancer. But that's not true. People die of prostate cancer all the time. And why cut off? I gather that he's got a life expectancy of 2 to 3 years. Why cut it off if you want to keep on living? It's just baffling to me. The whole thing is baffling.
Yeah. So, Sally, you're infamous for hosting dinner parties in Washington. You're a convener of salons with people at the highest levels of power. And did this ever come up? Had anyone ever mentioned the fact that Biden might have cancer? Had you heard it in town at all?
Never. No, I was shocked. I'd never heard a whisper about it.
Wow. I'm surprised to hear that. I do wonder, though, looking at this right now, if Ben Bradlee were still the editor of the Washington Post, how do you think he would have covered the story of President Biden, not just this moment right now, but going back over the past 4 years of his presidency, and when it became very clear to the American people that President Biden was too old to run? I mean, 2/3 of Americans said in poll after poll after poll he was too old to run for office. But then it became clear that he was declining, and yes, it became a right-wing conspiracy theory in some ways, or that's the way it was propped up to be. But do you think that your late husband would have taken it more seriously?
People always ask me, what would Ben think about everything? What would Ben think about Trump? What would Ben think about this? Ben was interested in one thing, and that was getting the story and getting it right. And obviously, it's you can't second guess this now. You can't say Ben would have done this or Ben would have done that. I mean, you trust your reporters, and you listen to what there's going on, and you print what you know and what's the truth. So, I mean, there were a number of people like Maureen Dowd and David Ignatius wrote very strong pieces about how he shouldn't run early on. And it was clear to me, to all of us, that he was not able to do it. But he still had these people in the White House who were sticking up for him. And everybody I know was just appalled when he decided to run again, because he clearly wasn't up to it. But I didn't hear, I mean, everybody knew that there were problems with speech and dementia and gait, and people were distraught that he was running again. But I don't know any reporter who didn't write something they knew about the president's condition. I mean, I don't think anybody would have done that. But I think they wrote what they knew.
Yeah. I mean, the Wall Street Journal did probably the most comprehensive reporting on it. When they did the piece about how much the people around Biden were really kind of like, I guess you could say, they were modifying his schedule, modifying his life, to make it work so that he could be both president and be in the condition that he was in. And I often wonder if someone like your late husband would have said in the paper in an editorial, like, if he's not, fit enough to run, should he be fit enough to still be president?
Well, honestly, I blame Jill Biden for this. Jill Biden is his wife. And if Jill Biden had stood up and had gone to him and said, Joe, you can't do it, and if you do, you're on your own, I'm out, he wouldn't have run, because he couldn't have done it without her support. And, she clearly was in favor of his running. And I just think it was a terrible disservice to the country. Yeah.
You wrote that letter to Jill.
Yeah, I did.
Around the time of the debate.
Well, I felt sorry for Joe Biden, because I didn't think she was protecting him. She wasn't protecting him from himself. And after that hideous debate, right after the debate, they're in the spin room, and she got his hand up, and they're victory, we won, it was great. And the next day he's off in North Carolina and making a victory speech. I thought, what were they watching? I thought it was just elder abuse, really, what they were putting him through.
Yeah. I mean, you used the word dementia earlier in this conversation. Like, you've seen it up close. Is that what you think that was? I mean,
well, it looks like the beginning of dementia to me. And my husband had dementia. He was diagnosed 8 years before he died, and it didn't really get severe until the last 2 years of his life. But it was clear that he would. I would see him. He'd be making a speech, and he'd forget where he was, and he would stumble. And I finally just said, no more speeches. I told everybody in his office, no more speeches, no more public appearances. That's not happening. I just wanted to protect him from himself, to protect his dignity.
Yeah. I do want to ask you, though, like I mentioned, you have been known for throwing salons with very powerful people. What did they say privately? Like, what was the conversation? Like, how often did you hear Biden's mental or physical decline or deterioration coming up as the topic of conversation at these sort of elite dinner parties?
All the time.
Really?
All the time. Everybody thought he shouldn't run. People just were distraught that he was running and terrible for the party. And that as soon as the debate was over, that he didn't get out immediately was shocking. But people cared about the country. What people like Joe Biden, they didn't. It wasn't anything against Joe Biden. It was against the situation. And I think everybody was horrified that he was put in a position where he was allowed to run by his staff and by his wife. And people felt sorry for him, but it was his egotistical decision to stay in office, and look what happened.
Yeah. I remember actually, as I was preparing for our interview last night, I was looking back at things that I had written at the time. And when the Her report came out and it said that he was a well-meaning older man, and that he really couldn't prosecute him because a jury would think it was actually just cruel, right? And now we know Axios has released some of the audio of his conversation with the special counsel, Robert Hur. At the time, the media on the left, and a lot of them were former Biden administration officials like Jen Psaki, they said, "How dare you, Robert Hur, this man is a hack. He's, they made a Robert Hur out, someone who they first portrayed as like really a man of upstanding, principles, a special counsel. They said he was then a hack, right? And I remember I wrote a piece for Puck called "The Old Man in the Scene," and it was published in February 2024, and I look back on it, and it was about this panic and the conversation at Cafe Milano that everyone was having around the tables about what do we do about Biden, but it really wasn't like, but if you were not living in Washington and you were not in those conversations and you weren't hearing it, you would think that everybody was protecting Biden because of the way his staff so vigorously, defended him, because of the way the, MSNBC media defended him, the podcasters. I mean, did you see that dissonance between the way that he was defended, the way that they were tearing down Robert Hur, and what was actually being talked about privately?
Well, Robert Hur was a decent man. There was no question about that. It did seem a little cruel the way he described Biden. And, but it was clear that he was accurate, that was what was happening. And nobody was shocked by his conclusions. So, but yeah, I mean, as you talk about Cafe Milano, that's all anybody was talking about because everybody was so desperate. How do we get Biden out of there? How do we get him not to run, first of all? And there were all kinds of interventions going on in the White House. Some of the family thinks he should, and somebody thinks he shouldn't. But Jill won out. She won out. And it was a tragic thing for her, for him, for the family, and for the country.
What were these interventions?
Well, I understand that there were family interventions where family would talk to the staff, and there would be these deliberations, and various members of the family thought he shouldn't run, and others thought he should, but that Jill was always very pro, and that's what it was going to be.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like kind of strange. I have talked to editors though at major newspapers who said like there was a sort of feeling that like you couldn't really hammer him in like the way that you might say another president. I mean, there was like a polite society, like a feeling that like it wasn't appropriate to call on Biden to step down until that debate.
Everybody felt sorry for him and felt that he was being not coerced because he clearly wanted to run, but that he was being set up for failure. And it was just, I think it was unpatriotic of him to run and unpatriotic of his staff to insist that he run, to support it.
Right. But it really only like it came to a head really until that debate. But before that, it was like you heard bursts of people, like you said, leaving op-eds here and there. But it truly like I even remember I was on Bill Maher and I said on Bill Maher after the State of the Union a few days afterwards, he was like, I was like, yeah, he got through a speech, a whole hour speech. Like we're supposed to be applauding someone. Because I remember just watching him being like, is he going to get through it? Is he going to get through it? And like we as Americans like shouldn't feel that way watching the president, right?
Well, I had a knot in my stomach for a year. Every time he would get out and do something public, I would just sit there because I remember what it felt like with my own husband, with Ben, when he would do something public. I would just sit there dying, pray, with my fists clenched and praying that he would get through it. It was so painful to watch. And I was watching the debate with friends. And when he walked out on the stage, you could see the halting gait. And we all just sort of went, oh no, oh no, oh no, before he opened his mouth. And then when he started talking, we just wanted to flee because it was so painful.
Do you ever wish that you had written in your column in the Washington Post about this, like what you had seen and what you knew?
No, I didn't feel like piling on. I mean, I wasn't covering him. And I was an observer. And I finally did write the letter to Jill, but before he dropped out. But I was only moved to do that because the situation had deteriorated so much. Right. But I didn't just feel like it was up to me to weigh in on that at that point.
I felt, though, at the time that people were, if you didn't defend him, you would be attacked. Like, look at Dean Phillips, for example. He announces that he's running and he's sort of laughed at, right? I got the feeling that, Gavin Newsom had to go and say that he saw Jill and told Jill he's not running against him. And there was just a feeling that if anyone tried, that the Clintons would come out against them, the Obamas would come out against them, the entire Democratic establishment would chew them up and spit them out, the Democrats would kill them. And it was just like, if you dare to come out against Biden, like you would be destroyed. You would have no future in the Democratic Party. I feel that. I heard that from people who were close to those people who could have possibly challenged him.
I don't think there was that kind of fear, not the Trump kind of fear where people are afraid to go up against him. I think there was a lot of pity there. And I also think that people weren't exactly sure what was happening with Biden, how bad the situation was. I mean, it was worse than we knew, but there were so many instances of him shuffling around and falling and bumbling and screwing up speeches and forgetting where he was. There was so much evidence for the public to see that I don't think you needed people out there going rah, rah. Dean Phillips probably made a mistake by running against Biden because that didn't do him any good or the party. But I think if he'd spoken up without running, I think he would have been more effective.
You think, how so? How did it hurt Dean?
Well, I think, by running, he clearly was not going to win. And so that was sort of a waste of everybody's time and money. But I think, and because he was running, then everybody just assumed that he would attack Biden. But if he had just been a congressman who was just speaking out what he thought was the truth, I think it would have been a lot more effective. And I think other people might have joined him in that. But once he was running for president, people didn't want to go up against Dean Phillips. I mean, up against Biden, against Dean Phillips, because what was in it for them?
Yeah, I guess I interpreted it differently. I thought, Dean opens the floodgates and people can come in. Like he opens the doors. He's the first one to break the seal, essentially, to primary Biden.
I think that was the right thing to do for him. But I think it was superfluous for him to
also, no one followed. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, I did speak with people who
didn't do any good.
I did speak to people who had ambitions, who said they worried that the entire Democratic establishment would turn on them. I want to get back to the idea of the Washington establishment. Was this a case of the establishment protecting itself, people wanting to hang on to their White House lanyards?
Well, there was certainly some of that. Certainly a lot of the people in the White House didn't want to lose their jobs. Okay. And really, you get used to power. Nobody likes leaving the White House. Nobody likes it. And So there was a lot of that protection, but I think people outside of the White House only saw, if you're looking at it from a selfish point of view, that they felt that Biden couldn't win and therefore they would be out as Democrats and it'd be terrible for the country. So I think it was sort of a mixed bag there in terms of, I mean, people look out for themselves here. And so it's like, what's good for me? So the people who were close to Biden in the White House, it was good for them to keep their job, but everybody else outside, the Democrats on the Hill and Democrats all around, was not good for them.
Yeah, because they saw that if Biden was at the top of the ticket, that they would lose. Yeah. Interesting. And I mean, if you were Jill, like, I know you said that you would have protected him more, but like now, obviously, hindsight is even more 2020. Is there anything you're looking back on it now that you would have said then or advised her then?
Well, he shouldn't have run. I mean, when people were asking Ben if he wanted to make speeches, I just put a stop to it, unbeknownst to him. Just made sure that he didn't find out about it. And television appearances and all that. And so I think that's what Jill should have done, is monitor that more closely and make sure that he didn't get this far. I mean, can you imagine? I keep thinking what's so heartbreaking is if all he had said, because he had promised to be a transitional president, if all he had to do was say, I promised I'd be a transitional president. I've done so much. We've accomplished so much this first 4 years. And I think it's time to turn it over to a new generation. He would have been a hero. He would have been a huge hero. And I just don't understand how he and the people around him didn't understand that.
And right now, I mean, it's so sad that they announced that he has this prostate cancer, but they're kind of on a media tour, a bit of like a cleanup effort, I would say. How would you say he should defend his legacy moving forward?
I'm glad I'm not his PR person.
Right?
Well, I don't know what you do. I mean, all he can do is say, I thought I was doing the right thing for my country. And, I thought I really believed I was the only person who could beat Donald Trump. And I don't know what more you say. That's the only defense he has, and he believed that. But I think there were a lot of doubts. And I don't know whether he had any doubts, but everybody else around him did.
Reportedly, he thinks he still could have won.
Well, that's what he's saying, but I don't think anybody believes that.
Yeah. How does the party move forward, though? I mean, I think that there's like a kind of a Biden litmus test. Like, what did you know? Why didn't you say anything? Especially if you want to be running in 2028 to be.
Well, I don't think you can blame people for not standing up and screaming and yelling. I know people did go to the White House and he got the word that, that he should step down, but he didn't abide by it. What are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. And as for the Democrats, I know that all the Democrats I know are just floundering. They're desperate. They don't know what to do. They're scared. They're feeling lonely. They don't have a message. And that's the problem we've read and seen many times, that everybody thinks that the Democrats have lost their message to the Republicans, that all of these working class people are moving toward the Republicans. How is that possible? When they want to raise taxes on everybody else and cut billionaires' taxes and taking money away from Medicaid and AIDS. I mean, it's just the cruelty of it all is, you can't imagine the American people buying into that. And this whole idea, what really worries me is that Ezra Klein said the other day in a speech, he said, it's the idea, Trump says, let's make America great again. But I think we should make America good again. And somehow Trump being there sort of brings out the cruelty in people and the lack of empathy, so that somehow it's okay to mock people who are disabled and to call people names and to bully people and to lie and to cheat and to steal. It's okay, all of that, and to be mean and hateful. And people seem to somehow go along with it. And it's really tragic for the country that we have a president who is the role model for so many people, who is so cruel and so tyrannical and so despotic.
A lot of polling finds that people don't admire, Donald Trump for these qualities, but they think he's more effective. So they'd rather choose kind of a bully and a nasty person than, even if they don't admire those qualities in him, rather than another, candidate. I think that the Democrats lost a lot of credibility in the last election, and that's sort of why they're in these soul searching
But
situations.
I think that I don't think that Trump is going to end up running for a third term. I don't know, but I don't think it's going to happen. And there are a lot of good people out there, Democrats, a number of people who could be president. And if only they had been given the opportunity when Biden decided to run. If he had dropped out, they would have all had a runway,
Yeah, they would have a primary.
And primaries and all that. So I'm not giving up on the Democratic Party. I just think that I understand what people say about the Democrats, that the Democrats are too elitist and, it's all the Ivy League colleges and the arrogance, intellectual arrogance and the snobbery and all that. And there's some truth to that. And the whole woke thing was and still is insane. It drove me crazy.
I can imagine, yeah.
Because it's so hypocritical. But that is such a turnoff, the woke stuff. And the Democrats just kept feeding it without realizing what a catastrophe it was. So, you drop that and you really make people believe that you care about them. Now, it's so clear that in this administration, they don't care about people. They don't care about the voters. I mean, the voters are just, I don't know, chattel somehow. They're just there to
well, I think when you do that, you get a reckoning, right, in your next election. So
right.
I think that's what they're going to face in
but,
the next.
Elon Musk's famous quote, it's something like, empathy is the empathy destroys progress. And, that tells you everything you need to know, because if you're not empathetic, I mean, Democrats have always been known to be empathetic for people who are underprivileged. And the Republicans clearly don't care about them. I mean, it's all the billionaires, big money, jets, yachts, planes, just palaces, mansions. And I don't know why that doesn't turn off the ordinary person who's out there struggling to make ends meet.
I got the quote. It's the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. But I do want to ask you about this idea of the wealthy and the oligarchs and how they've been sort of clinging to Trump. What do you think about how Jeff Bezos is leading the Washington Post right now? It sounds like his takeover of the opinion section has led to a kind of a mass exodus at the paper.
Well, Jeff bought the paper and he owns it. And whoever is the owner of the paper is basically in charge of the editorial position of the paper. And clearly Jeff has decided that he didn't like the way the editorial position was going, was not according to what he wanted. And so he's made a number of changes. It's his right to do that because it's the editorial page. I think because of those decisions, a lot of people have left the paper. I mean, it's like a ghost town. I mean, the most talented people. I mean, there are 40 some talented people who've gone more. I have very few friends left in the newsroom, but what he has not done is interfere with the news side of the paper, which is the key. I think if anybody found out that Donald Trump had called Jeff and said, "I want you to kill the story," and Jeff did, that would be the end. That's the red line. That would be the end. But right now, I don't see that happening because I think Jeff really does understand the difference between the news side and the editorial side. And Matt Murray, who's the new editor, I think is doing a very good job. He pulled the paper together when it was falling apart a year ago. And, the paper's good. I mean, the Washington Post is a really good newspaper, and they've been doing great work. And I said to Matt the other day, I said, who are all these bylines? I don't recognize any names. He said, well, they're all younger reporters who were working in the paper, but didn't get a chance to shine because there were all these superstars. And now the superstars have left, so they've risen to the top and they're really making an effort. And so that's very heartening. So I think, I think whatever Jeff's move, I think everybody's watching very carefully to find out who the next editor of the editorial page will be, because I think that will tell you a lot more about where Jeff's mind is.
It feels like Bezos came into town and, he wanted to wine and dine and hold parties. And he sort of wanted to be the king of the Beltway. This was obviously in like the Biden era, but he seems to have lost interest. He's like fled town. He's in Cannes at the film festival with his fiance, Lauren Sanchez. I mean, what do you make of it? Do you think he's losing interest in the Washington Post and just sees it as kind of a hassle?
Well, I hope not. I mean, I don't think he came in thinking he was going to be the host with the most in Washington. I really don't. I think they bought a big house because I think he thought he would probably spend more time here. I just don't think it's their town. I mean, I don't think it's where they enjoy themselves, where they have a lot of friends, where they have fun. So that's why I think they haven't spent a lot of time here. But they have their own friends, their own lives. They have friends in LA, Miami. They travel on their yacht all the time. And people don't see them very often here.
I want to go into that piece that you wrote for the New York Times, in which you described the Washington scene right now as Watergate level anxiety. And that you said that there was fear because of Trump. The title of the opinion piece was Watergate era Washington was less toxic than this. Tell me about this.
Well, that's true. I mean, you can't go anywhere. The people are depressed and scared. And one of the points I was making was that fear is what has taken over this town. Everybody's afraid. When I say everybody, I mean everybody. Maybe not Trump. I don't know whether he's capable of fear or not. But everybody around Trump, because we all know how fickle he is. He can be your best friend one day. Look at how many people he fired in his first administration. And he's already gotten rid of his national security advisor and half the team there. So I think people who are in the cabinet or any big position in the White House know that he could turn on you in a minute and you're out. So I think everybody's treading very carefully around.
He was like that during the first term, though. I mean, in fairness, I think he fired Mike Flynn on February 14th, the worst Valentine's Day ever for me.
Yeah.
I remember that distinctly.
He fired everybody.
Everybody. But there's sort of a no scalps policy this time around, so they haven't been firing as many people.
Just wait.
Just wait.
Well, for one thing, he doesn't like to admit he's wrong.
Right.
And so by choosing people like Hegseth for Secretary of Defense or Kristi Noem or any of those people, I think that he, and there was so much pushback when they were nominated that I think that he doesn't want to be proven wrong. And I think, so I think people will have a better chance of sticking around, but they're still scared. They know he could turn on them in a minute, and he would. All they have to do is keep congratulating him and flattering him and telling him that he's the greatest and doing everything he wants, even though it's totally against their own conscience, which is what they will do to keep their jobs.
Yeah, it does feel quite sycophantic when you see everyone clapping.
The people who are most scared are people on the Hill, the Republicans on the Hill.
That's what I was going to say.
Every one of them has sold their souls. Every one of them is. I have a friend of mine who's a senator, Democratic senator, who said his Republican colleagues won't look him in the eye because they know they've sold out and they're just embarrassed and humiliated. but they're all too scared they're going to lose their jobs. And, their jobs are there because they're supposed to be doing what's good for the country. Instead, what they're doing is for themselves. And so that's really, but journalists are terrified because they're all afraid they're going to end up in jail. As soon as they start going after people for their sources, it's going to be a nightmare.
I think that the silence after the Qatar jet was pretty telling.
Everywhere you go, and there's no place you can go in Washington where the conversation isn't about how terrifying everything is. And I have a Hispanic friend who was accosted at Costco the other day. Some guy came up to her and said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "I'm from here. I'm an American citizen." He said, No, I mean, where are you from originally?" And she told him what country, and he said, "You don't belong here. Go back to your country."
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've heard that. It's horrible to hear that. And we've heard that throughout time, but I'm sure it's elevated, that sentiment.
I think people have given permission by Trump to be cruel and to treat other people badly because he does. And so is that what the role model you want for your children? Do you tell your children not to bully people, not to be mean, not to call people names? I think most parents do. Right. You tell your children to bring your children up to be kind. Well, Trump can't be a role model for that. So I don't know how you be a Trump supporter and still try to teach your children ethics and morals and values.
Obviously, this is a very serious problem that people are afraid of the administration. They're afraid because they want to keep their jobs. What seems even more frightening is the idea of journalists being jailed, sources being jailed and imprisoned. I think some of the cowardice on the Hill is just plain cowardice. You lose your job, but if enough of them revolt, that's a loud enough voice to take on Trump, in my opinion. And so what? You get primaried, deal with it, right? But then again, maybe they just ushers in a whole further, crop of members of Congress and the Senate who are further to the right, although I don't think they'll win in primaries. I mean, I don't think they'll win in general elections if they win the primaries, like this guy in Texas, Ken Paxton, who's like a Trump clone. But we may, Republicans may lose John Cornyn for that. But I wanted to ask you, I wanted to talk to you about the piece that you wrote, because obviously this is a very serious problem. But you had a very unforgettable way of telling it. I love the idea of how the establishment in Washington is coping with this by doing improv at your house. And you mentioned that Bob Woodward is also doing improv. Please tell me about this. Who's there? What are the topics? What's going on? Take me inside that room.
Well, I've been doing improv for a couple of years, and it's the most fun thing I've ever done. And it's 2.5 hours at class every week. You just laugh. And I always come out of there feeling exhilarated because I've been laughing. I haven't been thinking about the country or Trump or anything. And I just would have dinner after dinner after dinner where people would just sit there and they would be depressed and upset and scared and sad and confused and untethered. And so I decided to have an improv party. So I got my 2 favorite improv teachers to come and run it for me. And we had people come in the door. I had everybody serve cosmopolitans immediately because I wanted to get them to get juiced up. And then we had buffet supper. And then we all went into my living room, sat around, and they got up and started doing exercises with us. And it was hilarious because, you'd have to roar like a lion. So all these people were going, ah!
Oh my God.
Those are the warm-up exercises. And then I did 3 improv scenes with my 2 teachers just to get everybody loosened up. And then everybody else started being brought into it. And it was hilarious, absolutely hilarious. And Woodward actually wasn't coming because his wife was in California, Elsa. And she had told him about the party, but she said, Bob won't come, that he'll never do that. But that afternoon, he called me up and said, aren't you having a party tonight? And I said, yes. He said, well, why don't you come? And he said, can I come? And I said, of course. So he came over and he was hilarious. He has this real deadpan wit, sense of humor. And so he kept coming out with these great one-liners. Everybody was cracked up. But it was a really fun group, mostly journalists.
How fun. Yeah.
And
That's really fun. I was actually going to take improv classes when I was living in Washington for that reason. Just because like you need some fun, you know?
I do it all the time. It's gotten me through Trump.
This was back during the Biden years, but yeah, it still felt like I needed some. I think what I read from your piece as well, you were correct to assess that like in the first term, establishment Washington looked at Trump and his team as like sort of like zoo animals, right? That had just been like inserted into the establishment. They went to their same restaurants inside of the former Trump hotel, steakhouses. They kept to themselves. Sometimes they went to Cafe Milano and it was like a scene when they showed up. I loved how you said that the black cars would just be cluttered all over the place. But, you know, they sort of kept to themselves. And then when they were around, people looked at them like the Kellyanne Conways and the, who's like Cohn. I'm blanking on his name right now, but like,
Cohn.
Yeah, Gary Cohn. He would go out. Steve Mnuchin. They would go out, and you would sort of see them around town, right? But now it feels like they've done a proper takeover. Like they feel like they've earned their place. They understand the town. They're picking their own venues. They're creating their own venues, like that place by the Hill, Butterworth, Ned. It's no longer like this is, you know, an establishment that's only for Democrats. Republicans are there too. I think I saw Rick Grinnell with Scott Bessent there at Ned, you know, a few months ago. So it's like they're sort of really like they're owning themselves in the space of Washington, despite the fact that they're not really the establishment. Like I would argue, Sally, that they are the establishment now. I mean, they're the alt establishment.
I've always said that, you know, people, when they run for president, they always run against Washington, against the Washington establishment. But if they win, they are the establishment.
Exactly.
You know, and so the president is the head of the establishment. Now, in the last Trump administration, they didn't know their way around. They didn't know, none of them knew Washington. They were just out of their element. And it took them a while, and it was so chaotic in the beginning of the first Trump administration that it took a while to settle in. But they never became part of the scene. They were always in their, as you say, they were always in their own environment, like the Trump Hotel. And nobody ever saw any of them. There were a couple of them, Wilbur Ross and his wife, who would entertain. Kellyanne Conway was around, but mostly you didn't see them. This time they're everywhere. And they have taken over the town. You're right. Ned's Club is where a lot of them hang out. So journalists like going there because they have all their sources. They can walk up and down to work the table, work the room. But I don't know. I assume they're going to Cafe Milano a lot. But there are also new restaurants too, as you mentioned, Butterworth, which is where I've not been there, but my friend.
It's Bannon's spot. It's Bannon's hangout. Yeah.
Yeah. But a friend of mine suggested that we put on red wigs and go incognito.
Oh, you could have a hoot there. I've been there a few times. You'll meet Jack Posobiec. You'll meet all of the alt-right influencers.
Well, what am I doing sitting here when I could be there?
Honestly, the food's pretty good, though. I mean, like it's the owner or partner, you could say. So I don't think he's a full owner, Raheem Kassan. You know, he's British. He's Nigel Farage's former top aide, and he introduced like caviar into the menu and duck and kind of like more of a British cuisine. It's a bit French as well. Yeah.
But you're right. And you know, but I don't ever see them at anything I go to. I mean, you know, book parties or various events, and the embassies are not entertaining very much anymore, which is where you used to see people in other administration. So that there's not a lot of intermingling.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, they're not really book people. Usually the books are written about them. And they're tell-alls about, how, you know, from people who have left the administration about how horrible it was, or from journalists. Yeah. So that's probably part of it.
Yeah, most of the book parties are anti-Trump books anyway.
Yeah, exactly. There is a new club coming, which you wrote about. I've written about it as well. It's owned by Donald Trump Jr. and Steve Witkoff's sons, he's basically like the de facto Secretary of State, and this other entrepreneur, Omid Malik, who's in business with Donald Trump Jr. It's called the Executive Branch. It's opening up in Georgetown with a membership fee of $500,000. I wonder if that's a real membership fee, by the way, or if that's inflated. But what do you think about that, Sally? You wrote about it in your piece.
Well, I don't think the number is inflated at all. I gather at NED, you a $100,000 founding member, you have to pay that much to belong to as the founding member, and you have to get a separate special dining room at NED. But this club, I think it's just perfect for them, because the whole thing about the Republicans is that they are, even though they criticize the Democrats for being exclusive and elite, they are so much more exclusive and much more elitist than any Democrat I've ever known. I mean, I can't think of a single friend of mine who belongs to a club where it's $500,000 membership fee. And why would you belong except to keep other people out?
There's a little anecdote about Bannon, which I don't think is really known, but Steve Bannon is obviously the defender of the working class, or as he would like to say, as the right wing, MAGA right. And he loves to have multiple black cars everywhere he goes, and he sends them out places. He's obsessed with having black cars, and he's a wealthy guy. He doesn't come off like, he doesn't, act like, he doesn't dress like it, but he only travels by black car and a fleet.
Well, it's all about, it's like Trump wants to redo the East Room in the White House and make it into a gilded ballroom. I mean, this is not American. This is not he's not Louis XIV. And it just seems like everything that is symbolic of this administration is everything that's not American. Belonging to these exclusive clubs. And
well, there was always the Cosmos Club for the foreign policy crowd, right?
Well, but those clubs are...
Metropolitan Club.
Yeah.
They're hard to get into.
I have never belonged to a club in my life, and neither did my husband. But...
you hosted salons. Those are more exclusive. Come on.
Yeah, but you don't have to pay to join.
That's even harder. It's a harder membership.
But those clubs are sort of old school clubs where people use. There are lots of older people who belong to the Cosmos Club and the Metropolitan Club now. You see a lot of walkers and canes.
I know, I've been in there a few times to meet sources, and I'm always like, I don't know how places like this still exist. But
well, they have dinners, and people go there for dinner, and it's quiet and
a little too quiet.
Peaceful,
though.
Yeah, a little too quiet. Yeah, no rock music. No rock music playing in the background.
Yeah, that's true. I do love how you brought up the fact that the Mar-a-Lago scene and the way that they dress has certainly infected fashion in Washington, which, as you noted, is kind of stayed in a lot of ways. Blazers, shirtwaists, dresses, you wrote, informal haircuts and little makeup is how women tend to be. And they have made it like a Fox News, green room with the big hair and the tight red dresses.
The false eyelashes and the poofy lips and the stiletto heels.
Yeah, the Louis Vuitton, excuse me, red heels. It's funny because I was talking to someone in Palm Beach who's kind of like WASP, old money, and she was saying that now the plastic surgeons they're getting requests for the Mar-a-Lago look, and it's sort of like this buccal fat removal under the cheekbone and more filler. Lots of lip injections, hair extensions, all of it. It's just look.
Washington has always been very, women have always dressed very conservatively here because it just, for some reason, you don't want to stand out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll have to think about that. It's interesting why women have always dressed very conservatively here.
I kind of want that to go away, though. I think
every once in a while, some rich widow will come into town, and buy a big mansion, start entertaining, and we're have 5-inch heels, ankle strap, and low cut dresses and all that. And they last for about 5 years. Maybe they buy their way into town, have all these huge parties, invite people, and then it just kind of fades away.
Yeah.
Because it's not part of the culture.
Yeah.
I'm an Army brat, and so I moved every year and a half of my life growing up. And one of the things that I learned to do immediately was to adapt to the environment. So if you're living on the East Coast, you dress a certain way, and you move up. We moved from here, and I was wearing knee socks and kilts and button-down blouses, and I went out to the West Coast to high school, and everybody was wearing poodle skirts and Sadillac shoes and Angora sweaters with matching socks. You have to do that. If you want to be part of a community, you have to adapt, and if you really want it to work for you. And I think that's one of the problems, that some people come here and they don't adapt, and then they're never part of the community. And maybe that's the way they want it. But I would think if you want to move to Washington for whatever reason, I'm always interested in meeting new people and learning new things and understanding what the culture of the place is.
Yeah. I do think, though, when the Trump team read your piece about how this is Watergate level fear and sort of the way that you looked at them as being a part of the true Washington establishment, they probably loved it. Like, they probably wallpapered their offices with that piece. You ever think that?
Well, that's good. That means I've got a lot more readers.
Yeah.
I've gotten no feedback from the Republican side at all. I have no idea what anybody thought about it.
They love to freak out the establishment. Like, that's what they live for.
Well, the Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing, because they do freak out. I have to say, one of the things I admire most about this Trump administration, by Donald Trump mainly, but his administration, the people he's found, is that they have found they are the most imaginative, creative people I've ever known in terms of their ability to choose atrocities that will freak everybody out. I mean, you have to be really imaginative to say that the reason there was a plane crash over the Potomac was because of DEI. When they announced that, the president, the vice president, secretary of transportation, they're all standing there talking about DEI, we have to stop this. And I thought I didn't hear. I turned the sound up on the TV because I thought that can't be true. That they can't be saying that, because it's just so crazy. And there's so many things that, the paving over the White House, the Rose Garden, or, I mean, how do you go in and immediately get rid of USAID and the funding and let children die and malnutrition and medical care all over the world? But somebody had to think of that. Somebody had to think that up. I mean, somebody has to think up all of these atrocities and all of these things that cause people such pain and suffering. Yeah. They've caused so much suffering in the world already.
Yeah. Certainly true.
Let's not forget the gold pins with Donald Trump's face on them.
Yeah.
That's pretty imaginative.
It is imaginative. But the thing that they're pretty good at is that they're really good at finding ways to offend like a certain type of person, though, because there are people in America, and I'm not saying that what they did with foreign aid to reduce it, like such a small percentage of our budget, right? That really has no impact on us, but will kill, millions of people in Africa, giving them PrEP, so they don't die of AIDS through USAID. But like something that like offends people who really know about this and who are, probably more like Democratic leaning, liberal leaning, but that they could sort of like, people outside the country might be like, well, why are you helping other countries when I feel like I'm not being helped? You know what I'm saying? So they know how to offend people in a way that only kind of irritates one group. And it tends not to be their voters. And to go back to the New York Times piece, you suggest that like the way that to resolve this great divide, this conflict, this moment of crisis, as you called it in Washington, it would make sense to have more salons, like the kind of dinners that you host. But do you understand why people outside of Washington like look at something like that and they think that's elitist for a bunch of really powerful people to get together and to, talk about, how to be more chummy, or it's what Trump says is the swamp. And you compared that to these grand ballrooms that include all these people but are not very intimate.
Well, I would ask anybody who thinks that having friends for dinner, what's wrong with having people having a barbecue in your backyard and having a bunch of friends over?
Right.
Why is that a bad idea? Why is that elitist?
It's not that. It's the purpose of it is to convene, powerful people, to make decisions that are kind of out of the spotlight in a way. It kind of perpetuates the idea that that Washington is very incestuous, that everyone is sort of secretly acting differently than they do when they are in front of a camera or a microphone. It's seen as like negotiating behind closed doors in a way that perpetuates kind of the thing that everyone rides into into Washington.
Well, let me say this. I love to entertain. I really, really love nothing more than to have a group of friends I really like sitting around my dining room table or in my kitchen table, and with a lot of candles and wine and good conversation and affection. That thrills me. And I love it when people get up and feel good about themselves. Somebody once said to me when he left my house, I left feeling enhanced and ennobled because I want my friends to feel good about themselves. And I work hard at trying to plan dinners where people get together will like each other. And I just try to also have gatherings where people have the same ethics and values and morals that I do. And and people especially during these times, the world is such chaos right now and such a bad shape, and everybody is upset about everything. That I think it's wonderful to be able to bring people together and create a sense of humor, a sense of community. I mean, when you get people together, I know people leave here. I want people to leave here feeling that they belong and that they are not alone in their despair and grief about what's happening to the country. And so these are decent people. These are people who believe in the Constitution. These are people who are not indicted criminals.
Speaking of which, though, would you have President Trump to your house for a salon if you thought it would help to repair the country?
Well, first of all, I don't think it would help to repair the country. And secondly, I don't think he would come.
He did meet with Bill Maher. I mean, what did you think about that?
Well, I think that Bill Maher met with him and wanted to find out who he was and did so. I didn't have any feeling about that one way or the other.
Yeah, Trump can be quite charming.
Yes, he's known to be quite charming. But I don't know what you talk about. When you get people together, do you want to talk about Laura Loomer? Want to talk about Laura Loomer going in and firing half the national security team? I mean, what do you say about that? What do you say about the cuts in Medicaid? What do you say about no nutrition in Gaza? Let these people starve and let Netanyahu get away with it without even providing humanitarian aid. So it's hard to say, would you? And one of the cabinet member in the former administration asked me if I would like to have a joint dinner party with them, inviting their successor. And I first thought, well, that's an interesting idea. We'll try to pull people together. And then it turned out the successor was over the top. And I just pulled out. I said, I can't do this.
Oh, really? But isn't that sort of the point of it, though, is if you could get those people together? I mean, if you have a bunch of people who believe the same thing and they're all commiserating, like, it is friends at a party. But if it's truly a salon and it's people who are supposed to have different views and come away feeling differently, it might be worth it.
Well, I've thought about it, and I've been asked by a couple of people after that, and recently, if I would get together with them and have some sort of a gathering with half Republicans and half Democrats. But
no rhinos, though. It's got to be like MAGA Republicans, Sally.
Has to be MAGA Republicans, exactly.
Yeah, because it doesn't really, yeah.
No, I have a lot of rhino friends.
I'm sure.
But I really like to, I don't like to have people in my house I don't like, for one thing.
Fair enough.
So one of the reasons I think my parties work is because they're all really good people, decent, kind, honest, honorable people. And they like each other. And Washington is a very small in a lot of ways. There's the community here. People know each other. They've grown up together. Whether in the old days, the Republicans and Democrats, your kids all went to the same schools and you went to the same churches and synagogues and you had the same issues, neighborhood issues. And that doesn't exist anymore. That kind of interaction doesn't exist anymore. But there was never a problem. But when you have people spouting cruelty, it's really hard for me to get my head around that. I just don't first of all, I don't understand it. I don't respect and admire it. And so I'm not really, my father used to say, my parents were great hosts. And my father used to say, in my house, a guest can do no wrong. And I feel that way. I feel like when I invite somebody in my house, it's somebody who I like and I care about, and I want them to be here and have a good time. And I want them to feel comfortable. And if I invite somebody who I already feel has done wrong, I won't be able to say in my house, a guest can do no wrong.
Right. Yes. Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. Maybe you have to take it outside, take it to a boxing ring or something.
Well, I'd be happy if I thought that I'd be happy to try to have some sort of a joint event if I thought that we could get people who could talk about real things and be honest. But they lie all the time. Trump lies about everything. And so do a lot of people around him. So how do you have a conversation with people like that? I don't know.
Sally, this was really great. Thank you so much for your time. Love hearing from you. And you've got so much, knowledge and insight. And it's such a pleasure. I hope to have you back on again.
Well, thank you so much, Tara. And congratulations on your new show. It's very exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
You've come a long way, baby.
You got to start somewhere, right? Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks for joining the Tara Palmeri Show. Sally has a new book coming out in a few months called Silent Retreat, so definitely head to the bookstores and grab it. If you like this show, please subscribe, follow, rate it, review it, comment, share it with your friends. We're just getting started, so send me emails with your suggestions, your thoughts, tara@tarapalmeri.com. You can watch us on YouTube at Tara Palmeri, and I will be back again this week.